Is ChatGPT going to replace the work of a writer? And how can you, as a writer, use tools like this as part of your workflow? Hi there, my name is Brian Collins. Welcome to the Become a Writer Today channel. So if you're not familiar with ChatGPT, it's an artificial intelligence tool which has been released in beta by OpenAI. Basically, it's a large English language learning model, and it can generate remarkably or seemingly remarkably accurate answers based on questions that you put into the interface like this. You can use it for coding, you can use it for research, and you can use it to write and create content. But should you? And what should you know if you're going to do this? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain some of the ways writers can potentially use this tool and what some of the limitations and restrictions are. Now, suffice to say, it's free to use, so you can log in with your account and try it straight away. And it's also in beta. So the tool is changing over time. So chances are by the time you've used this, the interface may look a little bit different. That said, I hope you enjoyed the content in this video. If you do, hit thumbs up. And if you want to get more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you're trying to plan content for your site, OpenAI can help with that initial part of research. It can help you create a topical map. If you're wondering what a topical map is, let's just ask OpenAI. So it's going to give me a brief explanation about how a topical map is basically a list of ideas, or it should be a list of ideas or topics or themes related to a subject. Now, in this case, it's talked about topical maps, including population maps, climate maps, and economic maps. So this isn't really relevant to content publishers. So I'm going to re-ask the question again. What is a topical map for websites? So you can see that you sometimes need to interrogate OpenAI's answers because it still is in beta. So this answer looks more correct. It's basically describing how it's a graphical representation of topics or categories on a website rather than on geographical features. So now that we know what a topical map is, let's ask it to create one. To create a topical map for a website about coffee mugs. Now OpenAI should give me a list of example topics that I should potentially cover or have on my site if I were to have a website about coffee mugs. So perhaps I could write some articles about the best types of coffee mugs, ceramic mugs, glass mugs, travel mugs, and so on. Then I should talk about the materials, how to care for them, how to customize my coffee mugs, gift ideas for coffee mug lovers, and then an About Us section for the site. So this will give me lots of different ideas that I could then plug into my keyword research tool and then would help me create an outline for an article that I could potentially write myself or give to someone else. So now let's use OpenAI to create a blog post outline for one of these topics. So create me a blog post outline about best ceramic coffee mugs. The caveat here is that I would have checked the keyword search volume for this particular topic. So now it's given me a rough outline for an article that I could potentially write and all of the topics that this article should cover. Now, sometimes you, of course, you will need to validate this with your own research to see what's ranking for the keyword term best ceramic coffee mugs or whatever the potential topic is. And just because you go ahead and write this article doesn't mean you're actually going to rank for it. It does depend on other external factors, but you can see how it can help you speed up the research and writing process. So you can actually take this one step further and say, write me a blog post about the best ceramic coffee mugs. I'll just delete the typo. Now, OpenAI will give me a couple of hundred words about buying the best ceramic coffee mugs. Now, I've usually found that when I've experimented with asking OpenAI to do this, firstly, it can take a little bit of time to generate the answer. Occasionally, you can time out depending on when you use the tool. But the copy that it will give you is usually okay if it's, a general article like this, about ceramic coffee mugs. So it's not technical. It's not something that requires a huge amount of research. But sometimes there are factual errors. So I would not take this content and publish it directly on my site. Instead, what I would do is I would go and research these ceramic coffee mugs. I would buy them or read about them or see what other reviewers are saying before I included them in the article. And I would also include some personal impressions and I would also expand on the article as well. So usually I try to write a blog post that's about 1,000 to 1,300 words long, whereas this is approximately 500 or 600 words long. So it's probably not long enough to rank. And you can see it would need a bit of copy editing. So for example, it just says conclusion here. But it is helpful with the research process. And you can even take this one step further. So if you write anything online, you'll know how important a good headline is. But headlines can be a bit painful to write. That's because we often have to write 5 or 10 variations of a headline to find one that works. Now, it's this type of writing that OpenAI is really helpful for. So write me 10 headlines for this article. And now when I plug this into OpenAI, it's going to give me 10 different options that I can choose from. Now again, I'll just need to make sure that these headlines reflect what's in the body of the article. And I'd also need to make sure that my keywords are included and that these headlines reflect my site or what my audience is searching for. But you can see I could quite quickly come up with 10 headlines for my article, a rough draft that I could then research and put my own impressions into, and or an outline that I could give to another writer. So it is quite good for this type of basic content, which just requires some desk research over the internet. It's also quite good for tedious or monotonous writing. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're publishing blog posts or articles, then I find I often get a bit frustrated writing meta descriptions and synopsis. But they are useful to have, particularly for search or if you want your articles to rank, or perhaps you just want something that you can put in an email or so on. Well, again, OpenAI can help speed up this process. So I could say, write me a synopsis for this article with the keyword best ceramic mugs. So I've found after using OpenAI for the past few weeks that the more specific you are with your requests, the more accurate your answers. And if you're not happy with the accuracy, you can just re-ask the question or rephrase it in a different way. That's probably one of the best things about OpenAI. You know, it's conversational. Actually, I have a typo here, but let's see if it affects the results. So in this article, we highlight the top 5 best ceramic mugs on the market and provide some considerations to keep in mind. This is probably quite long now for a meta description, but it could work for an email. So I'm going to ask it to reduce it by 50% so I could potentially use it as a meta description. So let's see what OpenAI comes up with. So this is better. Again, it's probably a little bit long for a meta description, but I could potentially use the first sentence. Now let's have some fun with OpenAI. So I've talked to some other people who are using the tool, and you can do things like this. Explain it to me like I'm a child. So this can work if you have some technical documentation or literature, but you want to, explain it to a general audience, but you're struggling to do that. So you can put something into OpenAI, like some text, and then say, explain it to me like I'm a child. And then it can simplify the language a bit. Of course, it's up to you then to check if actually that makes sense. So you can see here that this is a lot more readable and engaging. Arguably, it's probably a little bit patronizing too. So you'd need to make that decision. But let's try another one. Write that in the style of a 1920s gangster. So now it's saying, hey kids, you want the lowdown on these fancy ceramic mugs. And it's putting in some slang and vernacular from the 1920s. So quite creative. So let's try another one. Write that in a Baroque, flowery style. So I suppose, although OpenAI has lots of different use cases, if you're a writer and you need some sort of writing prompts, or you just want to explore different genres, this could be a good way to get going if you can't think of anything to say. And while it's generating this answer, that again brings me back to the outline. So if I was briefed with writing this article and I didn't know what the article should contain and I was stuck, I could use this for the initial outline and then start writing it. Anyway, let's see what the output is. So you can see here that this is a lot more flowery and full of adjectives and adverbs and verbose language. Or at least the first few sentences are. It seems to lose the Baroque language further down. But definitely you can see how you can use OpenAI to explore different writing styles. Another way you can use OpenAI as a writer is for turning features into benefits. So that's the best way to talk about a product or a service. So let me show you an example. So explain the key features of Grammarly. So Grammarly is probably my favorite writing checker or grammar checker. I use it all the time on my site. So I'm quite familiar with the product and its features. So I've put in this particular prompt because I haven't done this before in OpenAI. So I'm interested to see what the answers are and if they're correct. So it's saying its key features are grammar checking, spell checking, punctuation checking. It's also suggesting vocabulary enhancements and plagiarism detection, and also writing style suggestions, and also customized feedback. That's probably left out some specific features, for example, the writing style guide. But anyway, put those features into a table. So I could potentially use this table on an article on my site, or if I was writing about my own product or service, I could create a table that I could use too. Now you might need to copy edit these features first. So you can see how this could be a real time saver if you had an article about your product or a service and you wanted to summarize it in a table as well. With the caveat that you need to make sure that these are actually correct. And you can take this further. You can compare different products or different services as well. So I'll become a writer today. I regularly publish roundups of best books, best authors, best genres, and so on. Sometimes I write them myself, sometimes I brief other writers. And the briefs take some time to research and prepare. So let's look at this topic. So prepare me a list of the best Irish authors. Now I did work on this before I started recording this video, but this is a good use case so you can see some of the restrictions. OpenAI has prepared a list of some of the best Irish authors, including James Joyce, Beckett, Yeats, Heaney, and so on. I'd argue it's left out some authors. So for example, where is John Banville? Where is Jonathan Swift? And where is Emma Donoghue? But lists like this are arbitrary. Now I've used this to research authors from other countries and from other time periods. And in some cases, the answers have been incorrect, or it's included books that they didn't actually write. So again, you would just use this as part of your initial research rather than accepting what OpenAI says as 100% factually true. But again, it is a bit of a time saver. And I can also take this one step further, put this into a table. So if I wanted to, have a list like this for my own notes or for my own research, rather than as an article, perhaps I could have it as a table in my Zettelkasten. And I do talk about what the Zettelkasten method is on another video. So again, a real time saver for your research or for organizing your ideas and for your notes. The first limitation relates to anything that's relatively new or requires a little bit of expertise or knowledge. So I have an example on screen of a non-fungible token or NFT. This is known as a Chromie squiggle, and it's quite well known within the NFT space. Now you don't need to know much about Chromie squiggles, but suffice to say, if I put in what is a Chromie squiggle into OpenAI, it's probably going to produce some factual errors or issues. So let's plug this in and see what it comes up with. And that's because OpenAI doesn't crawl data that's been published online or look at data that's been published online in 2022. So it doesn't actually recognize the term Chromie squiggle, even though if I were to search for this in Google, there are dozens of results and news stories about the Chromie squiggle NFT. So basically, if you're covering anything that's new or contemporary or newsworthy, don't expect OpenAI to help with it. The second limitation relates to technical content. One use case that I haven't really covered because it's probably outside of the scope of what writers like me do, but perhaps you do, is you can use OpenAI to create code, including HTML, or in this case, code for an infographic. So I asked it to find some statistics about generative art trends. Wasn't able to find me any statistics, unfortunately. So then I asked it to create an infographic about the food pyramid. So something technical that requires, current research? No. Something general that's commonly known and accepted? Yes. And it's given me some potential topics that I can add to this infographic with the caveat that this is just a basic outline. Then I asked it to create a listicle of common types of generative art. And it gave me, a listicle of types that I can include. I went ahead and did some additional research and there were gaps. It was missing some of the types that I should have included in this listicle. I asked it for links and URLs. OpenAI cannot find links or URLs. So instead I asked it to provide corresponding examples for each of these types of generative art that are NFTs. And it did provide examples, but I went and did some research on each one of these examples and they weren't all NFTs or non-fungible tokens. So I would not rely on this for factual research. I would just simply rely on it for informational content that's freely available or accessible. That said, it is a bit of a time saver. Ask OpenAI to give me some examples of generative artists. It's produced me a list of 10 different people. Now, I've asked OpenAI this before, and sometimes it's given me artists or given me answers that aren't entirely factually correct. So again, if I were to publish this in an article, I would still need to go and research each one of these individuals to see if they actually are generative artists and what they've created. And of course, you'll see that OpenAI doesn't provide the links. So if I say provide links, I'll get a response like. So it's saying that it's unable to provide links as it's a text-based AI and does not have access to the internet. However, you can get around some of the restrictions in OpenAI. So let's say I were to write an article about ceramic pots. So to return to my coffee topical map that we talked about a few moments ago. So if I put in this command, add references section for an article about fascinating facts about ceramic pots. Now OpenAI will mysteriously be able to provide me with some links that I could potentially use for my article or add to it. Now it'll take a few minutes for this to run. So you can see firstly it's provided me with instructions for how to add a references section, which is a bit irrelevant. Now it's also provided some potential links and sources that I should check. However, I'd still need to verify that these are actually accurate. So let's click on this one and see. So it's taking me to a 404 page. So again, I'd also need to check that these journals are correct too. So I've tested this particular workaround a few times, and in some cases the references and links are correct, but in other cases they're not. So in other words, you know, if you're doing in-depth research, this is only a starting point. It's kind of like when you're in college and you cite Wikipedia and your lecturer or professor says you can't cite Wikipedia, you need to cite the original source. Well, that's what you need to do if you're going to use OpenAI for this type of research as a writer. For the purposes of the video, I'll show you how you could create some HTML with it. So I'll turn that into HTML. I can add to WordPress. And OpenAI should now turn this into an output that looks a little bit like the infographic, and I can just copy the code and paste it into my site. Now you'll notice there is a lag here sometimes where OpenAI seems to take a bit of time to run. I found it depends on when you're using the tool. So I'm based in Ireland and I'm using it morning time GMT, but I found it can be a little bit slower in the evening time, perhaps because that's when the more people in the United States are using the tool. Anyway, you can see it's generated some HTML code that I could copy and paste into my site. So as an alternative workaround, what you could do is write your article as normal, paste it in and ask OpenAI to turn that into code. I did experiment with that as well, but I found out that if you paste in a long article, say several thousand words in length, OpenAI will just time out. So you're probably just going to use this for short snippets rather than for anything long form. OpenAI and GPT-3 is a great tool. It can easily form part of your writing and research workflow, but I would not take content from OpenAI as factually correct, and I would not publish it directly on your site or on my sites. Basically, Google has come out and said that AI generated content is against its guidelines, according to John Mueller, who's one of its heads of search. So basically, you could get your site de-indexed or lose all of your valuable traffic. That said, I don't expect these tools to go anywhere, nor does anyone else in the industry. If anything, they could dramatically change how we interact with content and how writers create content online. In fact, I came across this interesting thread on Y Combinator from an Alphabet employee. They describe how large language models like GPT-3, which powers the OpenAI tool, are one of the biggest areas of research at Google. And the technology is coming, and it's going to get exponentially better over time. So even if you're not quite ready to use OpenAI as part of your work, the tool is still free to use, so you can experiment and play around with it, with the caveat or caution of, you know, using everything it produces as 100% factually correct or something that's ready to publish. So I hope you enjoyed this roundup of OpenAI. Chances are by the time you use the tool, it will have changed because it's in beta, and every time I log in, they seem to be adding new features and changing how it works. If I've missed something or if there's something you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comment section below. And to get more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.